Hello friends, how are you? Hope you are doing well. So let us continue our discussion related to the environmental management system requirements. The next requirement is about compliance obligations. So the organization shall determine and have access to the compliance obligations related to its environmental aspects. Determine how these compliance obligations apply to the organization, whether they are applicable or not. Okay, so we need to ensure that performing the exercises related to this and take these compliance obligations into account when establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving its environmental management system. So the organization shall maintain documented information for its applicable compliance requirements or compliance obligations. So for this, the organization shall have list of relevant legislations, list of permits, licenses, NOCs, evaluations of the compliances with legal obligations, compliance analysis, determining the compliance obligations which are being derived from environmental aspects, measuring in the monitoring plans for the compliance obligatory requirements. Then what sort of questions you can ask related to the compliance obligations? So as an auditor, you can ask like, does the department determine and have access to the compliance obligations related to the environmental aspects like required local rules and regulation requirements? Okay, determining how these compliance obligations apply to the department and the company or the organization. Next is about, does the department or the organization keep its compliance obligation in a documented form or not, such as emission records, waste records. Next question is about like, are these following licenses or permits or approvals available to demonstrate full legal compliance, like license for the waste collectors, air emission permits, wastewater discharge permits, permits and license related to the dangerous goods, environmental fees related to the, like for an example we can say wastewater discharge fees, registrations at the authorities, wastewater discharges, air emission inspections. So these are certain licenses, permits or approvals which you can verify as an auditor. Is there any documented information retained of these compliance obligations? So these questions you can ask related to the compliance obligations. Next requirement is about the planning actions. So the organization shall plan to take actions to address the significant environmental impacts, aspects and impacts, compliance obligations, risks and opportunities. How to achieve this? How to plan this? So we need to go for integration and implementation of the actions into the environmental management system processes and other business processes actually. And we need to evaluate the effectiveness of these actions. So when planning these actions, the organization shall consider its technological options like financial, operational, business requirements. So for this to verify, the auditor shall go through certain documents like action plans, measuring and performance monitoring plans, audit results. So you can ask certain questions to the auditee like, has that organization planned actions to address the significant environmental aspects, the compliance obligation, risk and opportunities? Does the organization plan how to integrate and implement the actions into the EMS process and other business processes as well, and evaluating the effectiveness of these actions what you have taken or what you are planning actually. So when planning these actions, the organization shall consider the financial, operational and business requirements. So these questions you can ask to the auditee. Next is about environmental objectives. This is a requirement where we can think about environmental objectives and planning to achieve them. Any company, any organization which shall establish the environmental objectives at the relevant functional level, taking into account the organization's aspects, environmental aspects, associated compliance obligatory requirements and the risk and opportunities we can consider. So the environmental objective shall be inconsistent with the environmental policy. It shall be measurable, monitored, communicated and updated as and when appropriate actually. So for this to verify as an auditor, you can go through with certain documents like list of environmental objectives in the relevant categories, comparison with environmental policy, communicating or communications or making objectives known actually. So you can see the communication records, internal and external agreements on the objectives, like you can think about the business or project plans, the agreements, contractual requirements, rules for pursuing the objectives, degree of achievements of these objectives. So to ensure these environmental objectives, we have certain KPIs to ensure the effective fulfillment of these requirements, like we can go for customer related environmental objective verification, volume of like packaging, reasonable packaging, reusable packaging, we can say, type of transportation system, product related environmental objectives like effective material utilization and utilization rates. We can think about utilization rates of the machineries, rework rate, rejection rate, stock levels. We can think about external service providers, their assessments of environmental performance, the number of complaints with the neighbors and official authorities and the general public. So this is what you can consider as KPI to ensure the effective compliance with respect to the environmental objectives. What you how you can ask the questions related to the environmental objectives, where we can think about have these environmental objectives and targets been established at its different levels or the functions in the organization. Are these objectives and targets being documented? Are these objectives measurable, monitored, communicated and updated? And these objectives shall be maintained in documented information actually. So that's what I want to say, that please ensure that these objectives and targets have been established at each relevant function and level within the organization, so shall be in line with the department or the organization's business activities, products and services. Next is about the planning and actions to achieve the environmental objectives. We can think about when planning how to achieve the environmental objectives, the organization shall determine what shall be done, what will be done, what resources will be required, who will be responsible, when it will be completed, how these results will be evaluated, including indicators for the monitoring progress towards the achievement of its measurable environmental objectives. So the organization shall consider how actions to achieve its environmental objectives can be integrated into different business processes. So for this to ensure, the auditor shall ensure that evaluation results, analysis of performance indicators, reports of the delegated environmental representatives. So these documents which can be verified actually. Then next is about how the auditor can ask the questions related to the audit planning actions to achieve the environmental objectives. So we can go for questions like, for the identified environmental objectives, the organization will be determining what will be done, what actions will be taken, what resources are required, who has that responsibility, when it will be completed, the timelines actually, and how the results will be evaluated, including indicators for monitoring process towards the achievement. So next question which you can ask, like, has the organization considered how actions to achieve its environmental objectives which can be integrated into different business processes actually. Next is about the resource requirements. So the organization shall determine and provide the resources which are needed to establish, implement, maintenance, continual improvement of environmental management system. So for that you need to verify certain documents like investment plans for the staff, equipment, properties, factories, projects, resource for EMS, environmental management system, position planning, role descriptions, shortage and actions, external suppliers, service agreements, employees, time budgets, and then you can verify certain documents related to the utilization rates of the staff involved, means like any KPI, risk assessment and redundancy planning, illness and rate of, we can think about the absenteeism as well. Yeah. What question you can ask related to the resource requirement? So has their organization determined and provided the resources which are needed to establish, implement and maintenance and continual improvement of the EMS? So what resources are required? That shall be determined by the organization. Which resources? Financial, operational, technical, human resource. So that we need to consider. Next is about the competency requirement, competence. The organization shall determine the necessary competence of the person who is doing work under its control within the organizations and can affect environmental performance and its ability to fulfill its compliance obligations. The organization shall ensure these persons are competent enough or not. with respect to the appropriate education, training, and experience, determining the training needs associated with the environmental aspects and environmental management system, taking actions to acquire the necessary competence, and evaluate the effectiveness of the actions taken. So for this to verify, you can, as an auditor, you can go through certain documents like records on qualification requirements, job descriptions, training plans for the new joiners, new employees, records on the performance reviews, training plans, training certificates, qualification matrices. We can think about the records of the assessment of the effectiveness of the training courses, verification of the competency measurement and testing, letter of appointments, compulsory trainings. We can go through with certain other documents related to the KPIs also for competence. We can think about extent of the implementation of the needs assessment, number of training sessions per year and employees rate, assessment analysis of the effectiveness of the training courses or mentoring programs, training cost, proportion of the external and internal training courses, and assessment of the trainers also, very important. Assessment of the trainers also you can consider. So for this to ensure, you can ask certain questions like determine whether that organization has the necessary competence, have ensured the necessary competence for the person doing the work under its control, ensure that these personnel are competent enough based on their education, training and experience, and the training need analysis has been considered with respect to the environmental aspects. Thank you friends for now. We'll continue our discussion. Thank you.